That AI isn't just changing how we work, but it's also changing how our industry thinks, how we work with our customers, what our customers' expectations are. And so it's kind of this multi-layered, like everything is different in a good way, but it's kind of impacting how we think about AI and how we think about delivering work and good customer experiences to our customers on a regular basis. So just to kind of set the stage before I dive into some of the survey results, I think if you've been in customer success for a while, you've probably seen it where customer success really just meant customer happiness, right? It was all gut feel. It was mostly CSMs just doing what we could, right, to take care of our customers. We've evolved over the years. So CS has gone from just a human-centered motion to including digital, although for many of this, that just means automating emails, right? And now agents and AI and how we can leverage all of these tools together to help better serve our customers. At the same time, we need to bring humans from just that customer happiness driver and happiness advocate to really providing either strategic guidance or technical support, really evolving into that more hands-on supportive consultative role, right, for our customers and what their needs are today. Digital, we're starting to bring that entire experience together using channels like community, education, product experience, and email to help better serve our customers at scale. And for agents, we're really looking at agents and AI that can help both augment human teams, provide those AI insights they need in order to do their work better, more effectively, and make better customer decisions, as well as autonomous agents that can help act for us, right, in specific tasks and workflows and really discrete elements of customer success, but really helping to drive scale, reach all of our customers across even the long tail, and help CSMs spend more time on the work that matters most for our customers. So at Gainsight, we're bringing all these elements together. If you're not familiar with the Gainsight platform, we have human, digital, and agent tools that bring together all of these different motions into one cohesive experience. Because to deliver retention today, customers need more than a CSP and more than a customer success manager. They really need all these different elements together to drive that holistic experience. And that's what Gainsight provides with our platform. I really want to get into today's results, though, because there are some really good stats on how customer success teams are leveraging AI and what we're seeing in the market. Again, this survey polled over 400 different CS professionals, and I just want to highlight a couple of the big ticket stats related to AI and agentic adoption for everyone here. First, CS investment may be reassuring for some of you, but CS investment is holding pretty steady. 80% of respondents in this report reported that they were either increasing or at least keeping their investment the same in customer success. And a lot of that investment, the chart on the right here, was in headcount, AI, and in digital. Headcount, of course, is both a push and pull, right, depending on the business, but that investment in AI and digital is really huge and shows us where, from a technology perspective, CS teams are thinking through how they work and how they operate in the coming years. Besides that headcount, AI investment, again, being a major area for CS teams, the flip side is not a lot of teams are really adopting AI well yet. So despite that investment, despite the push and the budget for AI, adoption isn't quite growing like you might think. We did this same survey last year, and if you look at the year-over-year data between October 2024 and October 2025, although again, I'm sure it's changed dramatically in the last couple of months since then, we only saw about an 8% jump in AI adoption. So not even double digits, right? Not even 10% year over year. And many who are adopting are still stuck in those early initial rollout phases or early exploration POC stages. So they really aren't seeing full adoption or full embedding of AI across their business. Now, that said, there's still tremendous value from those that are leveraging AI. So of that 52% that are adopting AI today, the most prevalent use cases we're seeing are things like meeting summaries and email drafts, pretty standard across most industries, right? Not CS specific. But we're also seeing a ton of value in use cases like sentiment analysis, churn risk prediction, especially for CS teams that are using that AI tooling to help improve their CS-specific workflows. And this is where we see a lot of benefit and value for customer success specifically is in those more nuanced and specific use cases. You'll note in the little call out in the top, only about 14% of CS teams reported actually leveraging agents today. So most are still in those initial AI use cases, a lot more efficiency gains, but starting to get into some of those agentic workflows and some of those true autonomous actions for agents. We asked in that same survey, what were the biggest barriers to holding teams back? What was preventing them from driving AI adoption? And we got some pretty interesting results. Again, we did this year over year. So the numbers you're seeing here is like the dip and the change between the 2 years of data. But what it highlighted was that it's not really a challenge to thinking about how we can use AI. It's really operationalizing it that's stopping most CS teams short. The reliability, I think, is one key call out here is that output reliability actually went up year over year. And a lot of it is, I think, the AI slop that we're all seeing, right? Garbage in, garbage out. When you're feeding your AI with really poor data and really poor processes and just understanding of your customer journey and your customer themselves, it leads to really bad outputs. So it's really tough to make good data, good AI work for you when you're not properly set up and don't have that great foundation of data for it to leverage and work from. So a lot of the things that we're seeing for teams that really want to accelerate adoption is focusing on making sure you have really good inputs and also focusing on training. I think one key call out from this data is that internal expertise around AI basically didn't change year over year. One, because there's 17,000 new things it feels like every week when it comes to AI and what's new and what we should be using. But it also means that there's a lack of internal change management, adoption, and skill building for a lot of CS teams in terms of how they should think about AI and that expertise gap and closing that gap ultimately at the end of the day. So at a high level, I just want to leave you all with three key takeaways from some of this data. One is that teams that are going to be successful with AI and agents really need to be intentional and strategic about how they adopt AI, making sure they have a plan, not just for the tooling, but that change management and that skill building that we just mentioned as well is really, really key there. You also need to know what success looks like before you launch so you don't get stuck in that POC phase where a lot of folks are still exploring, still experimenting, but not really adopting AI at a high level. And then finally, to measure that success, super critical, like anything, to tie AI investment to outcomes. Knowing the metrics you want to drive and working backwards to what AI tooling and systems will help you get there is a really great way to, one, make a clear business case, but also make sure you're tying everything your teams are doing back to ROI and proving the value of that investment. Now, these are just super high industry level stats, things that we're seeing across our customers, across the rest of the industry. And I know there is an amazing panel that I'm super excited to turn it back over to that will talk a lot more about what this actually means in real life and some of those practical applications. So with that, back over to you, Gemma.
Thanks so much, Tori. Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see only an 8% jump and
Yeah,
14% usage of agents. And yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into that report more. So I
yeah,
appreciate it. I'd,
absolutely.
I'd love to hear from our audience as well. Launching a quick panel now. Does your organization use customer-facing AI? Does your organization use customer-facing AI? Curious to see the response from this audience as I ask our panelists to talk about their current or recent applications of AI in customer-facing programs. So, Laurence, why don't we start with you? Is your organization using customer-facing AI? Can you give us a practical example of how Okta are doing that?
Sure. As I mentioned in my introduction, I focus on the scale, kind of the medium and long tail, thousands of customers. So we already are using AI there in our digital programs. So one example is we send out what we call value snapshots at scale to thousands of customers. Think of this like your Spotify Wrapped, if you will, right? Your summary of how you're using Okta. And as part of that, we do pull data from telemetry, but we also use AI to show benchmarking. So kind of, hey, customer A, here's your usage of Okta, and here's how you compare to other customers that are like you. And so that's something that enables us to do kind of digital CS at scale. We do that similarly as well for high touch CSMs, where we will provide essentially QBR decks to our high touch CSMs along with suggested talk tracks that is AI generated. So those are things we're already doing today. And then similar to the evolution that Tori talked about, we're definitely exploring things like agentic AI. We're looking at some of Gainsight's, AI tools, Staircase and Atlas, and looking to continue to evolve that.
Wow, that's really cool. I love the value snapshot. So you use AI to create that for each individual customer?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
It's highly personalized, so it's based on their specific usage.
Hmm.
And that piece is really more about data and telemetry, but the
Yeah.
AI component comes in terms of making recommendations for next steps and comparing
Oh,
to benchmarks.
I love that. That's awesome. That's a great use case. Thank you for sharing. As you were talking through that, I'm sharing the poll results now. We've actually got audience of 73% who are also using customer-facing AI. So feel free to like drop into the chat your current use cases. We would love to hear about them as well. And with that, I'll hand over to Chad. Can you tell us a little bit about recent customer-facing application of AI? I know you've got so many, so I'm curious which one you're gonna choose to share.
Yeah, what's interesting is that in my current role, excuse me, my current role, I'm a little bit newer into the role, and so I'm building more of a operating system in Claude Code, but more for internal as I do my research and data analysis. But previously, and what we're going to look to do where I am today is handling support through AI, like having a good significant amount of support handled through AI. And I think it's a very kind of low hanging fruit where you have some people that are a little adverse to it, but I think the technology has come so far along. And I think that if you talk to any CSM, the one thing that they all hate is just answering mundane questions that are in like a knowledge-based article. And so, yeah, it's a very easy win, and both for the customer and for the overall customer success team. But I think what's more kind of interesting that I'm working on right now is that it's not necessarily directly customer facing, but it's about arming the CS team with the right amount of data. And I think that where it's super interesting is that the amount of applications that something like Claude and then the other like Claude Code and other things can tap into, and the power that it has is crazy. So just as an example, one of the things that I've built is that I have a team that's about 20 people and growing rapidly. And I created this week where they now have a weekly report that tells them where they're spending their time, so they can just have a better understanding of where they can optimally spend it better. So which clients are they spending it on? And then it actually provides them with full feedback. Like, here's what you're doing well. Here's an area that you're going to improve in. And the reason it's able to do that is it's able to pull data from HubSpot or CRM, Slack, attention or call recording, and like a few other tools. So it's just able to give the CS person the context they need to give them almost like manager feedback they couldn't get before, and then helps them better set out their week so that they can better prepare for their customers.
I love that. So beyond the support use case, you're really looking at improving the quality of that human interaction by using AI to help scale the human.
Yes.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you, Chad. Anika, why don't you share some of the recent applications you've been advising folks on?
Yeah, I was about to say it's probably similar to what Chad just said, but also interesting how Tori said there's only so many percentage. I'm already forgetting the percent, but there's such a few percentage of teams using AI agents externally. But I find that
14%, yeah.
I work with 14, there we go, 14%. But I find the teams that I work with, they've done similarly what Chad is saying, where they've built internal agents essentially to help a customer success manager or some sort of CS professional that's working with customers day in, day out, like zoom out and be able to actually strategically work on an account. So a lot of the teams I end up working with, they're responsible for renewals, but also growth of an account. So really using AI to kind of look at all the data that's presented, whether it's again call recording, CRM data, product usage data, and just really being able to help that CSM almost advise them, like the bot helping the CSM advise them as to what to do next in a human relationship. So they take a little bit of the heavy work of the administration, the heavy work of the processing side of things, and really allowing the customer success manager to build that human relationship and advise on what's next with the account. So really, again, coming back to early either risk signals within the account saying like, oh, the customer hasn't done X, Y, and Z, so it might make sense to bring it up in the next call, or vice versa, like, the customer and the way they're using our product and services in all the different ways, they're probably ready for a growth conversation as well. So it might be better positioned to have the next QBR or the next meeting to be focused in growing and what's next with our product and service as well. So it's interesting that most companies aren't using AI agents externally, but I find on the companies that I advise and work with and coach, they are using AI agents internally to be what Chad just said is like almost like a manager oversight to help in sticky situations or again advise on what might make sense based on customer usage data as well. So I find that that's worked really well because, again, we all know CS professionals, we have a million and one things that we're trying to do. Why don't we take the lift off a little bit, and AI being utilized as a partner or a co-pilot in deciding what makes sense next with that account, I think is the most common use application that I'm seeing out there. And again, these are organizations with just 5, 10 CSMs up to 500 plus CSMs that are using AI in that way.
Yeah, that's a really helpful insight. And Tori, I'm curious, does this relate back to what you're seeing as well in the Gainsight ecosystem, this focus on co-pilot approaches as opposed to customer-facing applications of AI?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because internally it's a lot easier to trust that data, right? It's not putting the customer in potentially a negative experience, right? If it's not fully vetted and showing the right things. And I think that's one of the big reasons we're seeing CS teams really wary of AI and agents for their customer experiences versus those internal elements. I think one other interesting thing we're seeing is adoption is a lot easier when it's within existing workflows, right? Versus AI and tools that you have to go out and use in a separate use case, separate area, separate like thing to remember to do, right? For CS teams with their million and one, million and two things they have going on, to your point, Anika. So I think one big thing where we're seeing a lot of value is when there's opportunities to use those types of tools, those co-pilots within the existing workflow where you're already doing work, really easy change management for CS teams is seeming to be where most folks are looking from an adoption standpoint as well.
Yeah, I hear this. And I'm curious because we had over 70% of the attendees today say that they are using AI in a customer facing way of using it. So now I'm curious, for those who are, if you can answer this question around whether your company is being transparent about implementing AI in the customer facing experience. And this is anonymized. In case you were wondering, we won't be sharing your specific result, but curious if everyone is using AI and feels that their organization is being transparent about how that's being used. All right. We do have a brave 5% who are saying no. So I hear you, I see you, that brave 5%. I think this is a really big challenge that we have right now working with customers. Like oftentimes they don't know who's on the other end of the email, so to speak. So I'm going to turn this question, sharing the results with you all now. You can see it's actually 9% said that they don't feel like their company is being transparent in how they're applying AI to the customer experience. So to our panelists now, can you tell me an example of where AI actually maybe created a bit of a problem in the customer experience? Chad, you're nodding because you've got an example, so I'm gonna call on you
Yeah,
as well.
I think that we've already talked about one of them. So, to go back to like why I haven't done any outward like agents just yet, I think it's similarly, we need to make sure that we have full confidence in the data, or at least, almost semi-full confidence in the data. Um, in terms of like, for example, when I'm looking at call recordings and blending that into a summary and providing that, to the CSM, and eventually we want to take that data, mix it with usage data, mix it with other data, and provide tips and feedback back to the customer. We just want to make sure that we're, optimally using the best data, that it makes sense. And so I think that there's just that false confidence sometimes in the AI outputs. Like one of the other things that I've done internally, I think it's applicable to new CS leaders, is that you just want to understand the current footing in terms of your customer base, where the problems are. And one of the best ways to do that is to do churn analysis and to blend in like all of that data. And now it's even easier to do that. So that was one of the things I was doing. But I needed to make sure that everything makes sense. The segmentation, whatever vertical that it's putting the customers in, things like that. So that's the first part, is like just gaining trust. And I think the other thing is just sometimes you can over automate. So there's a concern that like you might be peppering your customers with too many things. And so you have to be really careful in terms of like degrading the experience, so that, it's like you get like a million alerts or something to that effect, or just data that doesn't necessarily, make the most sense. So those are the things that, we had. So if I go back to how I did with support, So we had AI, handling our support in my last company, and we actually had to scale back the bot a little bit because I think what people may not fully grasp, and I'm sure Tori does because you probably see this all the time, and Laurence probably sees it as well, is that you almost have to be like a gardener when it comes to your AI agents and your tools. Like you can't just set them and forget them. Like your company is constantly changing. There's new data sources, the models are changing, and you have to keep pruning to make sure that you're getting the optimal experience for the customer. And if you don't invest the right resources there, then you're just going to have a really poor experience. So that was one of the things that we learned, and that it requires guidance. And similarly, like our product is providing AI to home services, and specifically, it's a voice agent. And that's this constant thing we have to guide our customers is that your business is changing, and you have to configure the AI. It's not like self-learning, right? We're not at the Terminator world yet, thank goodness. So you have to keep, updating it and configuring it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Gemma, it's okay. I'll piggyback on that.
Please.
At Okta, I think very similar to what you talked about, Chad and Anika as well. From a support perspective, for example, we don't have customer facing like AI support bots yet. I think we definitely see that in our future. But we did start definitely with a big push on internal agents for that, right? To make our technical support engineers more efficient, similar tools for our CSMs and TAMs. And I think there's an opportunity to use the internal rollout to refine it and get you ready for that external rollout. So for example, one of the things we do in all our internal tools is every answer that comes back, the technical support engineer, the CSM or the TAM, they rate kind of the accuracy of the answer, right? And if it's not accurate, then they can supply, oh, here's where this is what it missed, or this is what was wrong. And so I think that sets us up well because we are going to be start to look at external versions of that, but basing that on the internal kind of learning experience.
Yeah, that's a really smart approach. And I think having the tight relationship between your agent engineer, your data scientist, and your frontline CSMs or, whatever flavor of title they have, that is super important to ensure that you are improving the model over time and you're getting it to a healthy state before you're letting it loose, so to speak, externally. Anika, do you have more to share on where you've maybe seen bad applications of AI?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take it back to 2017. I know
Okay,
that
let's
we were
go.
taking it back before, but like chatbots have existed long before, I guess we call them AI bots, I would say. And I think in general, like whenever we have an agent, a bot, whatever you want to name it, I think the worst application is a little bit to what Chad and Lawrence have already said and that we've already talked about eroding trust because it's just not being managed, it's not being trained, it's not being kept up to date. But I think also just introducing any sort of AI automation chat agent, whatever you want to call it, too early in the life cycle. And this is something like I will live and die by, but I think that humans buy from humans. We don't buy from bots, not yet. At least we're not at that terminal world that Chad's mentioning just yet. But humans buy from humans. Buying is an emotional process, and so is onboarding, so is driving adoption. All of that still has a behavioral and emotional side of things. And as much as we're getting there with voice and emotion reading into AI, we're just not there yet. And I've just seen too many times where we've rolled out either bot responses and even we made the mistake where we called it a human name and we thought that that was okay to say like it was a bot response, but it was Anika at support, for example. And that also eroded so much trust early on with our customers because, yes, like back in 2016, 2017, we were all just doing digital or scaled for the first time and we were rolling all this kind of stuff out. And it was just chaos where customers were like, what is this? Like, it didn't really make sense. And to Chad's point, they're not going to want a million and one emails from you or a million one like in-app notifications. They're going to want tailored to what they need at the right moment. And I find that when we start rolling out agents and bots too early in the customer lifecycle, we're breaking the trust before we even work on building it. And like all your sales teams that worked so hard on closing the deal, suddenly now we're just sending bot responses or immediate like some sort of AI automation. It starts to break our customer relationship and rapport before we've even really had a chance to see it succeed. So my poor application was again back in 2016 where we rolled out like support bots and we thought, okay, great. No one's going to notice if it's just Anika support bot, but immediately started to break trust and saying like, I don't want to talk to a bot. I want to talk to like Anika or a human team member that I'm meant to talk to. So I think with any change within SaaS and technology, which I know we go through a change every week nowadays, but I think with any change, like you're still dealing with humans on the other end, and it takes humans a very long time to adapt to any change, no matter if they work in technology or not. So like just be mindful of your audience and what they're expecting from you and the customer experience at the end of the day. So my bad
Yeah.
experience was rolling out bots in 2016.
So I'll counter that a little bit because the AI has really advanced. And in
Yeah.
fact, what I found at my previous company is that if you ask a customer, like, and this was providing AI support, and it's like if you ask a customer, would you rather speak to a human or AI? They're always going to choose human, most likely. But the CSAT is actually lower for the humans than AI, and the reason is twofold. One is speed. Usually AI can respond faster, and actually more less or not, like it's more consistent, and so it's really changed. And we actually do call like the AI a person, and for the most part, they don't necessarily know they're speaking to AI. So I think that's how far we've come. But I think that the challenge, and one of the things that I'm doing here is that not only am I pulling the data together to verify it, but it's also bringing all the data together. So one of the challenges is that desk and your usage data, like they all connect in the right way. And so for myself, that's like a massive initiative because we're just growing very quickly and we hadn't necessarily done enough of that, but that's part of the pruning that's needed to make all these systems work in the right way. And the last thing I'll say is that the other thing that you might find in a startup is that you have people using 20 million different tools and a lot of like, ambitious people that want to try different things. And so you have to kind of like coordinate that excitement and rein people in and making sure like, for example, we center on using Claude. So we're using Claude projects. And so we have different projects that are like agents that do specific things, but you really have to rein people in and make sure that it's not a free for all and chaos in your customer experience.
Yes, and I love that you brought up the counter, Chad. And in the spirit of that, I'm going to counter something you said about using the AI chatbots without like calling them humans, even though they're not human. Did I get that right?
It's just a matter of like not calling it up front that they're AI, but if they ask, "Are you AI?" then of course they're going to say, "Yes,
Yeah.
I'm AI."
Okay. So I like you have run similar programs, and I've always had a very strong point in saying that this is whatever name bot, right? Or whatever version of like AI. If it's an internal AI tool, let's say I built it on, Twilio Flex or Atlassian Rovo. I state that we're using the AI product in that part of the experience. And I try and focus very specifically on ensuring I've got a really good way to off ramp to humans when I need to, right?
Yes.
So that there's that understanding that okay, now you're going through to the human because there's some kind of like emotional thing or something else that the agent can't deal with. So I've seen places where that's not been done and it's resulted in bad Google reviews being posted about a company,
Yes.
you know. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of chat about this topic as well from an ethics perspective. Um, so does that change your view on things a little bit, Chad, with the naming of the
No,
agent
it
as
actually
human?
no, it's perfectly in line. In fact, our product has a human in the loop component where if customers say, "I want to speak to a human," we have like our own call center that can handle those types of like service calls that people are like they need like their heater fixed or something like that. So no, we account for that as well. I think to Anika's point, like you need to have that because some customers they don't want necessarily deal with AI. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that it's evolved where you don't necessarily have to mention that right away. because and also just the functionality has evolved and the technology. It's crazy and it's evolving every day.
The ground is always moving right now, which is I find very exciting. But important to have these kind of conversations, right? Because we are faced with decisions that we haven't had to make before. And so this whole concept of CS, what is CS? It's outcomes and experience. A core value to drive that is trust. And we have like Pandora's box available now. So how do we do that while preserving trust? Um, I'm gonna ask another question now around how to keep humans in your team aligned with what you're trying to get your agents to do? Or just in general, how do you keep a team of post-sales CSMs, account managers, um, onboarding exports, professional services? How do you get folks who do that job to be aligned as you're rolling out AI-led programs? Because there is a conflict there, I found. And yeah, Laurence, you're coming off the mic. I know that this is something that you probably have a lot to share on.
I do. Sometimes I find that if you have, say your classic high touch CSMs, folks that have been maybe doing that role for a long time, and so sometimes there's an attitude there that where, these digital tools and the digital programs, don't apply to me, right? Because I know my accounts really well, and I know I have great relationships and all that. And yes, that's definitely true. And there's certainly a lot of nuance in managing those accounts. But what I always try to tell those folks is, well, there's a lot of great digital resources that are there for you. And, it's just you're making yourself less effective if you just don't take advantage of them, right? So that's where I think it's sometimes a slow process. Change management is always like tricky, but showing them the value of, for example, I mentioned the QBR deck. Now our high touch CSMs, there's a lot less manual work they have to do because they get an automatically produced QBR deck. And sure, they can still customize it. But so we look at the statistics and those decks have been used by high touch CSMs like thousands of times. So now we're starting to get good uptick because I think people realize kind of the what's in it for me. The one other thing I will say, maybe from a different lens, is I do think back to a little bit of the previous discussion as well. One of the things I think for any CS leader out there is you should have a view, right, of what your organization will look like, say, a year from now. And I'll take an extreme view. Somebody, your CEO or your board or whomever, could come along to you and say, "Hey, Jim, I'll use you as the example. You have a CS org of X number of CSMs." And again, extreme view. I'm not saying I agree with this, but why do I need those XCSMs? Why can't I do it with AI, right? And so I think it's incumbent on every CS leader, like you should have a view a year from now what your org will look like and how agents will be there. They'll augment and they'll make, all the things we talked about, they'll make your CSMs more productive, shift them to higher value work. But I feel like every CS leader should formulate that point of view, because if you don't, somebody will formulate it for you and then they'll tell you the answer, right? So that's why I think these kinds of conversations are really important.
Yeah, I definitely want to add to this too. First of all, I love the idea of making sure that you educate your team as to why you're doing this. Why are you using AI? Let's say for QBRs. Another thing that I think is really important, is something that Laurence mentioned, is the leader like taking the lead here. And so, I was mentioning like I created this operating system for CSMs, giving them like performance reports. But I also did that for myself. And then I shared that query that I built in Claude Code with our leadership team here at Avoca and said, hey, like this is what I built. You can probably customize it for yourself. And so one is that I think that you, as a CS leader, you need to inspire your team to be thinking about how you can build things in AI. And you don't necessarily, let's say you don't necessarily have those skills and maybe that's just not your interest, then have someone on your team that does that. Like if you have a big enough team, but you have to be pushing the team forward. And in fact, later on today, my head of sales, he's my counterpart. He's going to lead a session on how the sales team uses Claude projects in their org. And then he's going to lead that for the CS team. So, just having these educational sessions and then inspiring your team to be thinking, okay, well, what can I automate? Like, where am I spending my time? And I have someone new on my team. He's like, oh, I built out these Claude Code projects. One of them is to give a summary of who you're going to meet with that day. And there's lots of things that you can do. And, there's other ideas in terms of hackathons, but just continuously educating, promoting, leading around how to better leverage AI and inspiring your team.
Yeah. I would just want to, again, piggyback on that, but also just, I know we've talked a lot from a leadership perspective, but I do think as someone who works directly with the customer success managers at organizations, they really do look for that from leadership. Like I have a company that I work with, and we have a Slack channel that's just around the prompts that we're using and what they're actually feeding slash helping us accomplish as a team. Because sometimes it's as simple as we're not prompt engineers. And if one prompt is working for me and it's not working for someone else, let's share that. Like, what did we tweak in our prompts to actually help us extract what we need from the product usage data or from the QBR deck or et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing I would say, which I just want to echo 100% what Chad just said, is that they really do need us to lead the way. Because as much as we say there's like a Pandora box of us being like, wow, everything's changing with every model every single day, it is extremely intimidating to our teams. Like they just do not want to do something wrong. They don't want to start using the AI application incorrectly and almost leading and sharing, hey, this is how we're using it and this is how it's working. Like let's be curious, let's zoom out and think of other ways that we can work in this, like Chad said, hackathons, anything else you can do with your team to really help them understand that it's a learning process. None of us have the answers. A year from now, this webinar is going to be a moot point because AI is going to change the game again a year. But I think for the actual CSMs or customer success individual contributors that are in seat, they are looking to leadership to help guide this conversation, because I do think it's changing so quickly that they fear that they don't know what's right. And they're kind of looking to your leader to figure out what is right or wrong. So just echoing honestly what Chad's just said.
Yeah, I love these examples. And, you know, let's just be real. There's like a lot of fear mongering out there. There's a lot of like, oh, AI is killing success or sales or go to market or whatever. And I think what's helpful is to remind folks who are in IC roles, particularly if they're CSMs, uh, two words: workflow integration. Workflow integration requires going to your customer, understanding their processes, helping them change their processes, helping them update procedures, helping them update governance. All of these change management type things, these require oftentimes human skills and humans to be involved. So all of the AI opportunity for automation, it's not really going to get into that aspect of workflow integration. This remains a critical requirement for customers to achieve their desired outcomes and to have a good experience as well.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm trying to make us more efficient. And even like this performance review like report that's provided, like there's a lot of time that we waste. And we think about outcomes, there's customer outcomes, there's outcomes that we have to perform in our roles for our business, but it's really around impact. And so you could be spending an hour writing some crazy response to essentially a support question, or you could be pulling data, comparing it to benchmark data, similar to what Laurence was describing, where they've automated a lot of this. And then when the ones that are really underperforming are the higher, value clients, those are the ones that you engage with. And so you really need that guidance, that automation that automates a component of your customer base, but also the guidance, because we just waste so much time in customer success on the most pointless things. If we ever looked at it closely, and in fact, the analysis that I did, it didn't just look at usage, and it looked at their calendar. So it went into their Google Calendar, went into their emails, went into HubSpot that's tracking all of this. It went into their call recording, and it literally detailed out like, you are spending too much time doing this. You really need to be focusing on this customer because their usage is this. And so it kind of guided their entire week. So it's just really incredible. But to your point, like, we need people to step in, and we're not at the point where we will have, fully automated. Because the biggest skill and the most hardest skill of customer success is in that moment, that decision that you make that's going to make or break the relationship, the next step, whether that customer is going to stay with you, or they're going to grow with you, or they're going to be taking that call from the competitor.
And maybe if I could, I'll piggyback on that. Tori had a good slide. I think, Tori, it was one of your first slides where you showed kind of human CS, digital, and AI. And I do think those are the components. But to go a step further, and I think, Chad, this is a little bit of what you talked about. Mike Maziarka, hopefully I'm saying that name right. He's the Gartner analyst for he's the main author, I think, of the customer success Magic Quadrant. And he has a really good slide where he shows not only those pieces, but he actually shows them all kind of intertwined, right? So I almost think of like three things that all intertwine. And I think, to Chad's point, it's not that it's all going to be replaced by AI. Like, there's a time and a place and a situation for human, digital, and agent. And the trick is, how do you make sure that they're all properly intertwined so it's optimized based on the situation or the customer journey, right? And I think that's ultimately where at least we're trying to push in that direction. So, for example, it's not just digital. I think the first step is, if you have digital programs, to your point, Chad, how can you trigger, say, human CS intervention at the right time? So that's definitely a good step. But then you go even further. This is actually something we're spending a lot of time on now at Okta. It's not just triggering them, but how can you fully optimize that transition, right? And maybe then the human interaction then drives feedback loop back to the digital. So again, it starts to become all intertwined. It's not just digital throwing something over to human. So I think really that's the ultimate view of kind of, can you optimize all of those elements at the right time and situation, so that overall, right, again, this customer journey from an outside in perspective, you're orchestrating the right elements at the right time.